He was a milkman from Canada who became a basketball coach in Mississippi. He wore cowboy boots and a Stetson, taught Sunday school, and opened his board meetings with a prayer. And he built the second largest long-distance phone company in America. At its peak, his company was worth around $180 billion. People said it carried half the traffic of the internet itself. Then, in the summer of 2002, it filed the largest bankruptcy in American history. Investigators found that more than $11 billion of its profits had never existed. Not stolen from a vault, not paid to fake investors, simply invented with a keyboard. Because here is the strange part, WorldCom was a real company. Real cables, real phone calls, millions of real customers paying real bills. So, this is the forensic question. How does a real business fake $11 billion of profit? This is the story of Bernie Ebbers, the telecom cowboy, and a lie hidden in plain sight on a balance sheet. To understand the fraud, you first have to understand the man the world chose to trust. Bernie Ebbers was born in Edmonton, Canada in 1941 to a working-class, deeply religious family. He delivered milk. He worked as a nightclub bouncer. He coached high school basketball. Then he bought a motel in Mississippi, and then another until he owned a small chain. In 1983, the idea that would make him a billionaire was sketched on a napkin in a coffee shop. Sell long-distance phone calls cheaper than the giants. They called it long-distance discount services. Ebbers was not the engineer or the inventor. He was the operator. 2 years later, they made him chief executive. And what Ebbers understood better than anyone was how to grow. Not by building, by buying. Over 15 years, he swallowed more than 60 telecom companies, one after another. In 1998, he pulled off the biggest one of all. He bought MCI for around $37 billion. It was the largest corporate merger in history at the time. The motel owner now ran a global empire. And he never lost the act. 6'4", bearded, in jeans and cowboy boots among the suits. He ate in the company cafeteria. He taught Sunday school. He sent his first email in 1999. He was worth $1.4 billion and owned the largest cattle ranch in Canada. Wall Street did not just respect Bernie Ebbers, it adored him, and that adoration was about to become the problem. Here is the engine underneath the empire, and the flaw built into it. WorldCom did not grow mainly by earning more, it grew by buying the next company. And it paid for those companies largely with its own stock, which means the stock price could never fall. A rising share price was the fuel for the next deal. To keep the stock rising, WorldCom had to keep hitting the numbers Wall Street expected, every single quarter. In 2000, Ebbers tried his biggest deal yet, a merger with Sprint worth around $129 billion. But regulators in America and Europe moved to block it, and the deal collapsed. For the first time, the machine had nothing left to buy, and the timing could not have been worse. Because at that exact moment, the dot-com bubble burst. The whole telecom industry had wildly overbuilt, demand collapsed, prices collapsed, rivals went bankrupt. WorldCom's real revenue stopped growing, but Wall Street still expected the same miracle, quarter after quarter. So Bernie Ebbers and his finance chief faced a simple, brutal choice: tell the truth and watch the empire fall. Or make the numbers say what they needed to say. To understand what they did, you only need one number, 42%. WorldCom's biggest expense by far was something called line costs. Line costs were the fees WorldCom paid other companies to carry its calls across their networks. Think of it as the rent WorldCom paid to use roads that other people owned. Wall Street judged the company by one ratio, those line costs divided by revenue. The target was 42%. When revenue was growing, that ratio behaved. But when revenue stopped growing, the ratio blew up. Every quarter, the finance chief, Scott Sullivan, would look at the real results. He would see how far they fell short of what Wall Street expected, and he would measure the gap. Then he would order his accountants to fill that gap, to the dollar, with entries that were not real. It was an exam taken in reverse. Decide the grade you need, then invent exactly the points that are missing. The first trick was to empty the piggy banks. Companies set aside reserves, money parked for future bills. WorldCom quietly released that money back into its profits. That bought them about $3 billion of fake profit across 1999 and 2000. But piggy banks run out. By 2001, the reserves were gone, and the gap was still there. So they reached for the big one, the rent, the line costs. Here is the trick, and it is simpler than it sounds. There are two places a cost can go. Rent is an expense. It hits your profit this month in full. That is the honest place for it. But WorldCom took that rent and recorded it as if it were an investment, a building it had bought for the future. An investment does not hit your profit now. It sits on the balance sheet and fades away slowly, over years. So, by calling rent an investment, the expense vanished from this quarter's profit, and the profit shot up. They moved $3.8 billion this way over just 5 quarters. And the effect was staggering. In the first quarter of 2002, WorldCom reported a profit of $130 million. Without the trick, that quarter was a loss of $395 million. A $400 million loss painted as a profit, with a few entries no one was supposed to check. Now, a fraud like this is not one villain in a dark room. It is a chain of people. Scott Sullivan, the finance chief, designed it. He even wrote a paper trying to justify it with accounting theory. Below him, a controller passed the orders down. Below them, mid-level accountants made the actual entries. And this is the human heart of the story. The people typing the numbers knew. One of them, Betty Vinson, made entries she did not understand, with no document behind them. She and a colleague were so uneasy they wrote resignation letters back in October of 2000. But they stayed. They were afraid to lose their jobs, and they believed Sullivan when he said it was just this once. It was never just once. Quarter after quarter, the gap came back, and the entries came back to fill it. And where were the outside auditors, the watchdogs paid to catch exactly this? The auditor was Arthur Andersen, the same firm that had just been destroyed by the Enron scandal. But here, unlike Enron, there is no proof Andersen was in on it. They were simply kept in the dark. The fake entries were made after the books closed, in round numbers, with no receipts behind them. And that was the fatal weakness. The fraud was not too clever to catch. It was too simple to prove. While the company faked its profits, Bernie Ebbers had a private problem of his own. He had borrowed enormous sums to buy his ranch, his timber forests, his yacht company, and the collateral for those loans was his own WorldCom stock. As the share price wobbled, his lenders demanded cash. If he sold his shares to pay them, the stock would crash. So the board did something extraordinary. It lent the company's own money to its chief executive. More than $400 million at a rate below what the company itself earned on its money. The company was now financing its CEO's private fortune to protect a stock price that was already a lie. Two illusions, leaning on each other. The fake profits held up the stock, the loans kept Ebbers from selling. All it would take to bring it down was one person willing to ask a question. That person was not a regulator or a journalist or a rival. She worked inside WorldCom. Cynthia Cooper ran the internal audit team in the company's hometown of Clinton, Mississippi. Following a stray tip, her team started pulling on a thread, looking into the company's capital spending. What they found made no sense. Billions moving from the expense column onto the balance sheet with nothing to justify it. The finance chief told her to stop. He said her audit was a waste of time. She kept going anyway. Her team worked at night and on weekends, in secret, afraid that if they were caught, they would be fired or the records destroyed. They burned the evidence onto CDs so it could not disappear. And in June of 2002, they took it to the board. $2.5 billion with no documents behind it. On the 25th of June, WorldCom told the world it had overstated its profits by $3.8 billion. 3 days later, the stock that had been worth $64 was delisted at 9 cents. On the 21st of July, WorldCom filed for bankruptcy, $107 billion in assets, the largest collapse America had ever seen. When the scandal broke, Bernie Ebbers stood up in his church in Brookhaven, Mississippi. He told his congregation, "I just want you to know you aren't going to church with a crook." And they gave him a standing ovation. At his trial, his defense was the cowboy himself. "I am just a coach," he said. "I do not understand accounting." He had said it for years. With a PE degree like mine, he once told a magazine, "You don't know the technical stuff." The jury did not buy it. In 2005, Bernie Ebbers was convicted on all 9 counts. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison. His finance chief, who cooperated and testified against him, got 5 years. Ebbers served 13 years. He was released, gravely ill, in December of 2019 and died weeks later. But the most important thing born from this collapse was not a sentence. It was a law. Just 9 days after WorldCom's bankruptcy, the president signed the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. It forced top executives to personally sign off on their numbers and put independent eyes on the books, by law. Because that was the lesson of WorldCom. The fraud was not genius. It survived only because no one independent asked for the receipt. And this is what makes WorldCom different from the Ponzi schemes we have followed before. Madoff had no real business at all. His returns were pure invention, paid with new victims' money. WorldCom was real. The cables were real, the calls were real, the customers were real. The only thing that was fake was the number at the bottom of the page. A milkman became a billionaire by buying the future, and to keep the dream alive, he sold a number that did not exist. $11 billion of profit, painted onto a balance sheet with nothing underneath. Just rent, dressed up as a building. If a number seems too good to be true, ask one question: where is the receipt?